Combined Air Emissions Reporting webinar. My name is Kristen Durance. I'm with Ross Strategic, and I'm providing technical support for today's webinar. Before I turn it over to our speakers, Brian Shaw, Ron Evans, and Mark Huyu, I'm going to take us through a quick slide showing logistics for today's webinar. As you probably all noticed, you have come into the webinar muted. That's just to help us manage the large number of participants today. If you are dialed in on your telephone, you should be in the audio. It's important for you to enter your audio pin, which will show up on your dashboard. It won't actually be 72. It'll be a different number. If you do that, oh, hold on one second. Sorry. Actually show you the slide that I'm talking through here. Apologies, everyone. If you enter your audio pin, when we do questions and answers, we can unmute folks if we need to. If you're using microphone and speakers on your computer, it's important for you to make sure that you do not have telephone selected here, just have mic and speakers, otherwise you'll get feedback in your audio. During today's webinar, we will be taking questions throughout the webinar via text. You can type those right in here under the questions box. Once you type them in, they'll be sent to us. We'll queue them up for the end of the webinar, but it's helpful for us if you actually have questions throughout the webinar that you go ahead and queue them up as you have them so that we don't lose track of them later. If you have any technical issues, please feel free to message myself. We're under Sarah Abramowitz on the dashboard, and we'll make sure to get you all set up. So now I'll go ahead and turn it over to Brian Shaw.
Great, thank you, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I wanted to kick us off giving you a little bit of an idea of the topics that we're going to cover, specifically the background on the enterprise and the past webinars that we've had. So we're going to try to bring you up to speed with the progress that's been made. Specifically along those same lines, we'll deal with the implementation plan results, and we'll share some of what has come from that process. And then we'll move into the shared facility attributes and the progress on the FRS, the Facility Registry Service Data Model, and talk about some of both the progress that's been made and some of the challenges and what we're doing to try to address that. And then finally, other progress and updates. So fairly straightforward from that standpoint. Those are the topics that we're going to be getting to in a moment. For now, I'd like to move, though, to our first poll question, which if you'll move that slide up, we're going to ask you to provide us information about what type of organization you're with. And so, if you will, Kristen, you can lead us through that process so we can get this first poll underway.
Great. So you should now see a slide that allows you to select which industry or type of organization, such as industry, state, local, EPA, other, on your dashboard. If you go ahead and click on your option, we'll collect that information. We'll give everybody a few seconds here to fill that out. While folks are answering that question, I just want to let everyone know we are recording today's webinar, and we will make both the slides and the recording available in about a week. All right, I think we've got probably almost everyone here. Close the poll. Brian, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Kristen. Thank you, everyone, for participating in that. That just helps us get an idea of what types of folks are joining us today. Now we'll begin talking some about where we are with the enterprise, giving some of that background. If you've heard it before, I apologize, but I think it's important that we continue to talk about and make sure we stay focused on why e-enterprise is important and why we're going through the process that we're going through. Hopefully you're aware of, but if not, e-enterprise for the environment is jointly governed by the state, local tribes, the SLTs, and the EPA to make sure that we're working collectively to modernize the business processes, or effectively we're trying to improve the environmental results that we get from the effort that's put into those various exchanges of information that have to occur. And so trying to enhance the services to the regulated community and to the public by making government more efficient and effective. And sort of where I look at that is, again, making it easier for that information to be submitted and effective, where we have QA/QC involved so that we're ensuring accurate data, timely data, and making sure that that data meets both the legal requirements as well as the practical requirements that we have, regardless of where we sit from the standpoint of a state agency, locals, tribes, or EPA, or the public, as far as that goes. So this is a completely new way of working together among the states and EPA, and so it's one that we're trying to make sure that we move forward. And as part of that process, we've done a number of outreach activities such as this, where we're seeking input from folks that have an interest, stakeholders that are pretty varied. So we're trying to ensure not only that you know we're listening, but that we're actually listening and taking different steps based on what we're hearing. We've changed the idea for the proposed, in other words, what we think this would look like or should look like to be effective in accomplishing our goals based on the input we received. The details are constantly evolving with the feedback that we get based on the CARE sub-teams, the webinars, and we'll be soon providing some other voluntary input opportunities. Again, the key, making sure that we provide accurate and appropriate opportunities for people to participate in the process. Okay, so from the past, we've focused on, CARE is focused on point sources. The combined air emissions reporting is focused on point sources specifically. You can see the bullets here: the TRI, the Toxic Release Inventory, the Greenhouse Gas Reporting Program, Compliance and Emissions Data Reporting Interface, or CEDRI, and the National Emissions Inventory, NEI. So that's what we focused on. In the use of those different reporting programs stem from different regulations, and so the process that we have in place currently is therefore very silo-driven. In other words, based on those different regulations, you have these different reporting streams that occur, and that doesn't necessarily lend itself to easily having combined reporting and or data retrieval, and that's part of what we're trying to address. And in fact, in 2015, a lean event was conducted, and the result of that was that there were an agreement that there's a more efficient process that could be utilized for air emission reporting in the future. And as what came out of that was that there's certainly a positive, although uncertain, return on investment. So we know there are benefits that can emerge from that, and the key is trying to make sure that we're maximizing the benefits while minimizing the pain, the challenges, and the growing pains associated with that. And so stakeholder input is impacting our results as it should, and I encourage each of you to continue to provide information, not only to make sure that we're comfortable with the process we're moving on, but making sure that there's not some unintended consequences that's not fully considered and avoided if it's a negative unintended consequence associated with that. Some of the key inefficiencies to be eliminated or reduced are the duplication and inconsistent components with regard to facility info and facility matching. So we're trying to make sure that we iron those things out front so that we don't have those challenges where you're having to duplicate what you're doing if it's not necessary. So we're trying to find those areas where we can streamline that process. Duplicative data entry and revisions by facilities of data elements that are included in several separate emission programs, again trying to make sure that we're combining those where we can. Oftentimes there's wait time that are caused by the current process in the National Emissions Inventory between the states, locals, and tribes and EPA, and so we're trying to make sure that where appropriate we can streamline that process to remove or reduce the wait time as much as possible. And part of that as well is recognizing there may be opportunities to streamline the augmentation requirements with regard to NEI so that we can again streamline that process to where we're not every time those are submitted having to go through the uncertainty of what augmentation might occur. Maybe we can find ways to build in those steps so that we streamline that process but maintain the comfort and accuracy associated with that. Some of the duplicative post-emission quality assurance by EPA in the states, a key area there because we have to make sure that the QA/QC, the quality assurance process is adequate, and yet doing that in a way that's more streamlined is beneficial for all. And then inconsistent emissions data across programs and associated work, in other words, the reconciliation, if we can address those up front, hopefully we can build in fixes for that to where we no longer have inconsistent data, and I think that's important for ensuring that as the end result of data are being used by whatever that stakeholder group might be, that needs to be accurate and it needs to be understood what it does and does not represent. So I think that's important. And then this is sort of and we'll see in a revised version of this, I think that Ron is going to talk to here in a minute, but this is sort of a visualization of what that future emissions reporting would look like. and I think it's useful because it sort of demonstrates a couple things that I think are critical. This portal could be something new, or this could be existing methods that are being utilized for submitting emissions data. And the key thing is that we're trying to look at amongst the various reporting that we talked about, those different data streams. We talked about TRI, the greenhouse gas, SEDRI, and the National Emissions Inventory. Those databases would then be populated through submissions through this portal. Again, one of the key things that I'm continuing to make sure that we are pushing for is that this is to be a voluntary program moving forward. We want to make sure that states and the states that have submission portals that exist for that data, that you don't necessarily have to change to something else. That if it's working well, you should be able to keep it. Ideally, the changes to make sure it can report into the common emissions database could be done behind the scenes. There may be states that decide that a product that comes out of this effort warrants switching to it. In other words, it makes it better, and so why not switch? We want to make sure that we're trying to keep that option available so that the data submission doesn't have to change as long as it's providing the information that's needed to meet all the regulatory requirements associated with that. But part of that process that would allow us to create this shared facility attribute system that would feed into that portal and make sure that the data that are needed are accurately queued and asked for, and those submissions could be made both on the attributes of the facility as well as the emissions inventory, which would then feed into and provide for the back and forth between those databases so that previous emissions are captured. The QA/QC is captured where the states and EPA can make sure that for their specific uses, QA/QC occurs, and then ultimately that you have that data then is available and have unified data access from the public of accurate data that's timely and that doesn't result in additional workload, and instead actually should streamline and provide for less effort and more accuracy in submission of emissions data. And so that's kind of where we are up to this point. I'm going to turn it over to Ron Evans to provide some of the information moving forward, looking at some of the progress that's been made and to highlight some of the changes that are coming, as well as some of where the implementation from the CARE implementation plan, and how that impacts moving forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ron.
Thank you, Brian. My name is Ron Evans. I'm with the Office of Air at EPA, and I've had the pleasure over the last several months to co-lead the CARE implementation team with Michael Burton of the Arizona DEQ and a pretty large number of EPA and state people trying to map out how we're going to get to that future state. And we've gone ahead, we've completed the work, and we've reported back to the CARE team, the full CARE team now, and we plan to be able to share the report itself with everyone by August, i.e. next month. And the implementation plan itself is effectively our roadmap for moving forward. Generically, it's going to include a discussion of who's overseeing the process, who's going to do the work, and how they're going to do the work. It's going to include a starter list of projects as part of this. It's also going to include a robust process for developing projects. We're embracing the agile mentality as we go forward, where we're working on short-term products that actually make a difference as part of this whole thing. And then most important, I think, is this last line on the page, where we're going ahead and putting together a framework for measuring progress along the way and helping define what is success for the overall CARE project. If I could have the next slide. What you see here was something we put together to try and put the concept of electronic emissions reporting into its broader context. We're within a framework of many different factors and constraints. And what this slide is attempting to show very broadly is what influences the collection of the emissions information, which is on the left-hand side. So you see the statutes, regulations, reporting program applicability, etc. So that shows what kind of information we're trying to collect and why. The right side and going down shows how that information that's going to be reported is actually used. How is that emissions information used? So going off to the right, it's for transparency purposes and communication with the public. Going down through the center, you have compliance and enforcement. You also have providing the basis for setting future policies or procedures, and also the evaluation of trends in air pollution levels, for example. If we could have the next slide. Now, what we have here is talking about the refinements to the proposed future state. As our team moved forward and looked at what had been done through the lean event and other things, we started digging into some of the assumptions about the future state. Some of them seem pretty obvious in hindsight, but we also felt that we needed to go ahead and be explicit in many of these. And some of these are a restatement of what Brian just told you about, but I think they all bear repeating at some level. So starting off with the very first here, the system that's being put together, the collaboration that's being put together does not assume nor preclude a single reporting interface. So that's to say that a facility may report through an EPA protocol or excuse me, a EPA portal, or may be through some state portal. And that's going to be something that is flexible as part of the system that we see it. It won't be a one-size-fits-all environment that way for the reporting. It will hopefully adjust to what seems to be the most flexible, not only for the reporting community, but for the regulators themselves, and balancing that out. The design implementations we have here reflect the fact that we're dealing with several different EPA programs, 50 states, several local programs, as well as some for tribes as well. All have slightly different systems. We have to be able to work and make trade-offs, if you will, between those different systems. So everybody is able to work together, but we're not putting together that one-size-fits-all. There's going to be a lot of flexibility when we start talking about maybe IT solutions. Once we've gone ahead and done some of the streamlining, you'll be using a lot of APIs that allow the systems to talk back and forth to each other. The second point here under design implications reflects the fact that there's some states that are very heavily involved in the collection of information, emissions information. There's others that only have a few reporters. They're not going to have an equal representation here. It depends on how much they are interested. So we are looking to have input from everybody as part of this process, and as Brian offered, we'll be looking for participation from industry at certain points as well. But we reflect the idea here that we're not going to get equal participation. While we're going ahead and trying to design a system that's appropriate for everybody, we're going to not get equal input from all. One of the things that, moving on to the next bullet, that we are certain of is that a combined system like CARE is going to require more complicated governance and implementation and maintenance. But we think that regardless of that, it's still going to turn out to be better than the siloed system we have now, because we're all going to be working together. We're going to be searching for places that we can do things smarter, faster, cheaper, so that it is going to have a bit of more overhead to it in terms of those communication aspects, but it should be an overall savings. This next point on the common facility solution is probably one of the key features of CARE, and I know Mark is going to cover this a little bit more later in this presentation. But what I want to emphasize here for the implementation plan work was that the bottom line is that all parties need to have a common understanding of what makes up facility X, if you will. at a certain location, so that we're talking about the same thing, be it between a state regulator and EPA, the state regulator and the facility, or with the public. But the key to this, and the thing we truly have to emphasize, is that we're not coming up with a single solution to the defining a facility. There's going to be flexibility, and some of the things you'll hear as the new facility data model that EPA is offering as its contribution is a lot of flexibility in how you might share information about a facility, so we can talk together in an intelligent manner. The final thing here that is of vital importance on the common reporting structure, accounting for unique program requirements. Some states, for example, have their fee systems tied to their programs. We can't mess with those kinds of things, so we have to make sure that we preserve those things that are important to each program. Next page, please. Now, Brian offered up that we had a different view of the proposed future state. We put this together here to focus on the benefits of the common reporting structure and what's shared there. We think it's a little bit clearer in terms of focusing on that common reporting structure. So we're going to share between the state, local, and tribes the pre-populated facility information about a direct reporter, and both those three groups and the EPA will be able to go back and forth with that. There's also going to be pre-populated emissions data there that's going to be, again, shared with the regulatory groups as well as the regulated facility who's going to do the reporting. The other key thing I think here, particularly from the aspects of a reporter, is that they're going to be able to know what are the unique program reporting requirements for their facility where they're located or what they're reporting for. So for example, in the ideal situation, a reporter will be able to come to a single place and say, I am a facility of the following type, say a cement plant. I'm located in state X, city Y. What are my reporting requirements going to be, not only to those state and locals, but to EPA? And this will be a place where you should be able to go ahead and understand all those different reporting requirements. Next slide, please. Now, what we've laid out here is what's titled a generic workflow. And what this is designed to show is the benefits and the common elements of the CARE reporting structure. And I'm not going to go through all the different points here, but it allows me to re-emphasize some of the things I was just saying in the preceding slide. So if you were to start at the left and look at what's labeled here 1B, a reporter can come in and ask about, well, what are my requirements across all programs? And again, it's going to be one-stop shopping when we reach that ideal of the future state. The second point here, looking at step 2, the reporter is going to be able to see what they need to report for a given program, so that the forms, the fillables forms, if you will, that come back to them will be specific to what they have to report for those specific programs themselves. And so this builds along the way and allows the reporter to be able to, one, not repeat information that they've provided before, be it about the facility itself or emissions, but to build on what's there before and only change that which is that needs to be updated. And then the final step here under number 4, you see it's going to go ahead and allow for the signatures and submission of the report. It will have a feature within the common reporting framework to do quality and completeness checks along the way to assist the process of actually getting the information in and getting it in a highest quality as possible. And then the final step you see here, the information is loaded into the systems and made available to the appropriate parties. Next slide, please. Now, going ahead and doing all this is going to require a good bit of guidance and structure. And so one of the things we focused on in developing the implementation plan was figuring out how's the work going to be done, how's it going to be overseen. And the slide that you see here is a representation of how we see the work being done. And so we've focused on what's called here the product design team on your left-hand side. And I'll go with a little bit more description of these in a few moments, each one of these. But these are the people that are going to be responsible for the oversight and the coordination. These are going to be the people that keep their eye on the bigger care future state. And as smaller projects are being done, seeing that they all build towards that future state. You'll see here a priority list. The priority list is those smaller projects that can go ahead and build towards that larger future state. The R&D teams that you see here are the small sets of people, as we say here, 3 to 5 people, that are going to do the work on those smaller, meaningful products that all will feed back into the development of the future state. And consistent with an agile process, it gives you the ability to test things out and have defined products that can be used before that future state is reached. So we'll have intermediate products that will help reduce cost and improve efficiency along the way. And then, of course, at the bottom, you'll see the very important feedback steps that particularly the product design team is going to be responsible for reaching out and as products are developed, getting them tested out so that we have products that are going to be robust and can be fixed in a fashion that we don't wait until the end and then find out that there's a problem with an intermediate step. If we can have the next page, please. Okay, now here I'm going ahead and covering the product design team, and it's a pretty large group. As you see here, we call it 12 representative members, and it's large here because we're bringing together 4 different programs within EPA itself, plus bringing in our IT group and others. And so that's bringing us to maybe, a half dozen or so EPA formal representatives, and we want to balance that out by representatives from our state, local, and tribe partners as well. We're not settled on this number yet, but we're going ahead and saying it's going to be a fairly large group that's going to oversee this process. It's going to be a very collaborative process in that fashion. We envision it as a senior team that's going to be standing for the duration of care, but what we've seen in e-enterprise is that people change jobs, and the model that we're following, as in with the e-enterprise Leadership Council, the philosophies and the principles remain the same, and the progress remains the same, even though new people come in along the way. And so that's our model for care here in terms of the product design team, is that it will keep going even though membership will change. When we look here at the responsibilities, I think that where I really would like to focus is under that first bullet under responsibilities and the word champion, because truly the product design team are the champions for care. They're going to be the ones that are providing the direction to get to that future state. They're going to be the ones that are responsible for resource management and working internally to find resources for this project, and going ahead and being the champions to say this is the right thing to do in terms of policy direction. And it's also going to be the one set on point for communications with both our partners, our regulatory partners, but also the outside world, in terms of making sure that we're going to get this right along the way and not have a process that drags out. And then what I skipped over here, as I just described that, is the care is heavily dependent on other projects which are ongoing, and the facility ID, which Mark will describe to you in a moment, is one of those. And it's important for this team to be in close communication with those other teams so that a facility solution process is taking into account what care needs and where it's going. If I may have the next slide. This next slide covers the teams that are going to be doing the work. They're going to be the ones that make care a success, and they're going to make care a success in manageable chunks, if you will. We foresee them being small teams, 3 to 5 people, as I said, probably increments of up to 3 months. Some of it is going to be a little bit, if you will, undefined. We will charge teams to go out and research a problem and then to go ahead and try and find solutions. Others, the problem may be well identified and the teams are charged to find the solutions. And each one is going to be a little bit different. And the important part that we have here is that we'll have several of these rolling all at once. They'll all be reporting regularly to the product design team, and the product design team will be able to make sure that any of the learning that's going on amongst these teams is shared with the others. So it'll be a very collaborative process in that regard as well. And one thing that we have to recognize here with these R&D teams is that working on this particular project is not the day job for most people. They have a small piece of their time allocated to helping see us to the care vision. And so what we're going to do is hopefully draw on a large number of experts that's going to help work on these R&D teams to share not only the development, but the understanding of what we're trying to accomplish, so it all moves together without being a burden on any 1 or 2 different regulatory partners or reporting elements. The next page, please. You've noticed in the diagram that we had a priority list there, and what we've shown in this page is the general principles that we're using for the priority list. We recognize, as you've heard in previous webinars, there's other works going on already, and that all those efforts are going to be integrated into this implementation plan, but we're trying to bring it all together with this implementation plan as we move forward. So some of the principles we're looking here is that we're looking for program overlaps between the existing regulations and programs within EPA and also across the states. We've identified a few of them here. The facility attribute, which I keep mentioning over and over, is probably a key in this regard. The interactions and joint reporting requirements of the National Emissions Inventory that EPA runs in partnership with the states has the highest return on investment, so that's going to be a priority. The product design team is going to look to pull together products that have the biggest impacts first. Consistent with the philosophy of e-enterprise, we're going to modernize and streamline first, and then we're going to look for IT solutions to help make things happen, not the reverse. We're going to be very aggressive in using agile development, which is looking to make small incremental improvements that go ahead and have the ability to have feedback and interaction early on, so that we're all developing forward in a combined fashion. Now, this final line on the slide talks about exposing regulatory changes that are necessary for the future state of care. And we don't want to emphasize that too much at this point. We are going to identify those things, those regulatory changes, but reg changes are not necessarily a priority for modernizing what we can do. We think there's a lot of opportunity to go ahead and make the systems more efficient and more cost-effective without making regulatory changes in the short run. Making regulatory changes takes time. It may be the right thing to do over time, but it's not necessarily going to be the first things that we would recommend. We're going to look for those things that we can change without the more elaborate process. Still getting the feedback, but not through a more formal process. The next page, please. My final slide of this talks about outcome measures. And here, what we've put together as the implementation team here is a set of what we believe are robust output measures for the product design team to work on very early on, to go ahead and set out the bar that we want to be measured against. So as you look through these 5 different measures here, you'll see X's, X%, Y years, and the like through here. And what we're looking for the product development team to do is to go ahead and fill in these numbers and publish these numbers as something we can be held to, both internal to the federal government, the regulatory partners, and also with the external community, like our regulatory, or excuse me, our like industry. So what you see here is just walking through these very quickly. We're talking about reducing industry burden, decreasing time to produce actionable products, increasing data accessibility, creating consistent information across air emissions programs, and overall improving the data quality. Now, I've run through this very quickly, and you will have the opportunity, as I indicated at the beginning, to read the entire report in August. It will be posted, and I'm available for questions at the end of this webinar. And with that, I'll turn it back over, I believe, to Markuliu.
I think we actually have another poll question on the next slide.
Yep, I was just going to pull that up here. I wanted to quickly share with everyone what the poll results were from the first poll. So just to give everyone a quick peek at what it looks like, the folks on the call look like. All right, and here is poll number 2. All right, Mark, and we've got about 80% of our people have voted. If you want to continue speaking, and then I will close the poll and show everyone the results.
Okay, sounds good. I can't see any slides right now. Oh, there we go. Okay, so it looks like about a fifth of you just need more information, which is understandable. We went through that very quickly. So we hope that by providing the plan publicly, you'll be able to get more information. And even though there wasn't a whole lot that we could present, it looks like there's a fair number of you who had a positive reaction, and some of you have a neutral reaction. Glad to see, though, that there's not a lot of negative reaction. So thanks for that feedback. That's really helpful. So now we're going to move into talking about the shared facility attributes, which is one of the key pieces of CARE. We have a few updates to share with you. Next slide. The facility attributes is primarily the role of a separate team called the Facility Identification Integrated Project Team, or IPT. And this team actually started in the summer of 2015, and their job was to develop a shared approach among EPA and state, local, tribal participants, a shared approach for managing facility data. And there was a large membership, a cross-cutting membership that represented both the state and EPA's program parts, people who understand the regulatory aspects of the work, and the technology, the people who understand the data systems that are handling facility information at the various agencies. So phase one concluded and included findings for various pieces of a common vision for facility identification. And these were integration and correction of data in as near a real-time way as possible, to include common facility profile model that will allow for varying levels of granularity, meaning some some agencies and uses have very specific needs, very detailed needs about facilities, and some have broader pictures and understanding the needs for what the facility means. It also would include, this common vision would include shared business rules and mapping to a common enough terminology, understanding that we all have certain terms that we need to keep for various reasons, but defining how those terms relate into a way of communicating with each other was necessary. Creating application programming interfaces, or APIs, that are flexible enough to work with all of the various data systems that need to participate with sharing facility information. And then include shared good practices and tools moving forward. So the facility IPT, as it's called often, phase 2 has just recently started. The IPT's purpose now is to coordinate these types of efforts across multiple work streams, and including frequent communication with a broader IPT community of interest. The work streams that are being focused on during phase 2 are user stories, meaning what are the different needs across the agencies for sharing of facility information, the business rules, how we're going to work together, the data model that will be used to share the information in the APIs, and then the phase 2 also includes a focus on pilot projects. And there were 3 pilot categories that were proposed in the phase 2 proposal. There was one that will focus on a pilot with our team, the CARE team, a pilot with state, local tribes that needs to be identified, and a use case with the EPA's new master data model, the FRS new data model that we've talked about in past webinars, and we'll talk a little bit more about on the next slide. And then the last work stream is governance. So another aspect of the facility IPT, like the CARE team, is to take an agile approach and learn lessons from the proposed pilots to inform further work of the other work streams. And the timeline that's been set for phase 2 is starting this summer. There was a meeting where all of this was decided just a couple weeks ago, and that will go through, the work will go through the spring of 2017. So we've also, the FRS team, which is that piece of EPA's contribution to a way of sharing facility data. This new FRS data model is providing a way for EPA to support the multiple programs, including state local travel programs, as needed with different facility definitions. So this new data model will enable us as a user community to manage and associate the different components or pieces of the facility and the characteristics or attributes of those pieces. It will allow us to integrate and share the components across environmental programs and systems. It's actually allowing us to do that without creating a single facility definition, but allowing for the different facility definitions of the different programs. But it does allow for the development of permanent IDs to cut down in the future on the need to match IDs from different systems. It allows a historical tracking of the evolution of and changes made to a facility so that different time periods for that facility can be represented at the same time for the data. Different programs may be looking at different time periods and need to look at the facility differently because of that. And lastly, it will allow easy access of data relevant to the individual programs. Okay, so a few other CARE updates to wrap up with for the webinar. We reported before on some short-term win projects, and one of those has been a WebFire search and export project. The objective of that project has been to expand the search features of WebFire for accessing source test results and adding a bulk download capability. This work has been completed internally on an internal test environment for EPA, and we had an internal report out to the CARE team where we got the team got some comments, and additions have been made since that happened in May to further enhance the bulk download feature to support larger files. And so this work is now pending a public release, which depends on our National Computing Center, which hosts WebFire, and they have a review process. And that can take from weeks to a longer couple months, depending on how much they decide the security needs to be reviewed on that particular project. But so keep looking for that. That's coming hopefully soon. Soon meaning at most a couple months from now. Another short-term win project is our SCC Web Services project. Just as a reminder, the SCCs are called source classification codes, and they are used to define processes and to describe processes at facilities. So the objective of this project has been to make sure that the up-to-date SCC list is publicly accessible on a web page or portal, and this has resulted in a few goals for the project. So we are going to develop, we're working to develop a search page, and that will include a bulk download feature. We also will provide other SCC information, background information. There will be a standard web form approach for generating emails to get user support when needs are identified for SCC additions or corrections. And there will be a web service that will be available for people to link from their data systems rather than have to post static files of SCCs that may not be updated. So the key pieces of this are the SCC search and download. There's coding ongoing now based on some on the team's efforts and wireframe mock-ups that were created and evaluated by the team. There is an upcoming beta testing that's going to be starting, we hope, in early August, and we are looking to release a beta version for wider use later in August. And then with that, the web service feature will also be available no later than when the beta version is available. It may be available sooner depending on how things go. The FRS RTR project we've also presented on past webinars. The purpose of this project is to use our new FRS data model and EPA's portal approach to support the collection of facility attributes directly from facilities for the Residual Risk and Technology Review Program, or RTR. And it would support RTR's needs and then also be building a foundation for RTR emissions collection under a CARE type approach. So the primary work that we've done to date is to enhance the facility widget that's already available, but to include sub-facility information. We have had 2 user feedback sessions that we have used to inform the next steps. And the facility widget views for the sub-facility information are expected to be completed in about 3 more weeks. And then we will be, within those 3 weeks, scheduling our next round of user feedback from our user feedback input forum groups. And then that will also be able to include software testing where the software has been implemented. We are also on this project loading all of the historical RTR data into FRS. So far, we've got our test load done and was successful. We've had to make a few updates to the data model to support the full RTR data set, and we're looking towards getting that done within the next couple of weeks. And then lastly, we're working to upload all of the 2014 NEI facility attributes to pre-populate FRS for future testing. Just some other updates. We recently presented at the Clean Air Act Advisory Committee in DC and got some great feedback from them. There was a lot of support from a couple of the industry representatives who were asked to speak with focus on continued and improved outreach and ability to get information directly from industry, which we fully agree with. We are also working on a quick start prototype project and have selected 4 states to participate in that. Coming up in September, the week of September 12th, the 4 states are Georgia, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Wyoming. We had 20 states who expressed an interest in participating in some way, so we weren't able to include all of them in a 1-week prototype session, but we were able to include 4, and we're really happy about the interest, and we're going to look forward to that in September. And then once the prototyping has been done during this project, that will help us make some decisions about the technologies that we want to use to potentially further the CARE project, and then that will also feed into the CARE product development team next steps and the priority list that's going to be created. So the public Trello board is another way we've added to communicate. And I have a I just want to show people what that looks like, and you can see the URL there, and I can show you what it looks like. I don't know, Kristen, if you need to transfer control to me in any way. Okay, Kristen, can you see that on the screen?
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay, wonderful. So what we see here is the Trello board. We have an instructions and background section to the left where you can click on these cards. There is that explains the color coding and whatnot. And then what we're going to be using this board for is as we get input through our CARE listserv to post the user stories that we get and provide information about where we are on the project. And right now we have information available on our short-term wins. The SCC project wireframes are available there for folks to see, information about the WebFire project. And to open these cards, all you need to do is click on them and up pops more information. Here's the wireframe PDF here in the middle of the card that you could open and take a look at. If you sign up for Trello, then you'll also have the ability to comment on the cards and subscribe to the cards, which means you would get notified when changes are made to a particular topic that you've subscribed to. All right, so that's all I'm going to show on that. Great. All right, so we have a number of opportunities for folks to get involved. Many of these are the same before. There are some new ones. It is still not too late if you want to become involved in the beta testing of the upcoming SCC Search and Download. You can see contacts here. If you have feedback for the integrated planning team, the EPA contact is John Harmon. There's a couple of state contacts as well. Joshua Kalfas and Regina, I think it's Collar from South Carolina. We also are interested in hearing if you would like to participate in the future CARE PDT or R&D teams. You may contact Kelly Poole at ECOS or Joe Mangino here at EPA. And here's the link for the how to send an email to the Join the CARE listserv. Industry also has opportunities to get involved. We really want to hear user stories that help us to better understand what industry is facing in terms of having to report to all these different systems and the problems that come from that, and ideas on how that could potentially be improved. So we have set up a listserv that industry folks can send emails to be able to have us capture that, and then those can get posted on our user stories on the Trello board. And again, you can join the CARE listserv. You also can be involved in the upcoming SEC Search and Download review. We have mock-ups that we have formed a team. We have mock-ups of the user interface for the facility widget. We've already formed a team for that, but that's several industry folks are involved in that, and there will be plenty of other opportunities. Okay, so I'll turn things back over to Kristen. This is the last question of the webinar, and then we'll get into your questions.
So you should see poll number 3 on your screen now. All right, it looks like our response rate is slowing, so Mark, I think we can move forward with questions.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you for that feedback. We definitely appreciate the positive and constructive feedback, and we'll continue to work to do a good job on the communication. Okay, so we have a few questions here. Many have been answered. Actually, I don't see any that haven't been answered.
So I just want to remind folks that they can ask their questions by typing into the question and answer box on their dashboard. In addition, if you have a more complicated question, we can also attempt to take you off mute, especially if you've dialed in via the telephone. It's harder for us to unmute folks that have come in on their computer.
Well, this definitely is the quietest group we've had on our webinars so far, in terms of questions at least.
Hey, Mark, just in case folks haven't seen the written responses to the 2 questions, do you want to go ahead and read those 2 out while we give folks another? Oh, actually, we've got questions coming in. Never mind.
We're getting questions coming in, but I'll still, to give more people more time to send questions, well, that's a good idea. I can read the questions and answers that we have so far. there's a question if the state already has a system that does the same things that we showed on slide 13, will the state be forced to change or migrate to the new CARE system, or can they continue to use the system that they have and like? And the response is that we're not planning on forcing anyone. We don't intend to force anyone to stop using their current systems. That CARE is striving to facilitate more streamlined communication and data sharing. And so if you know, between your system, if you're liking it and wanting to keep it, that's fine. But then the communication that is leading to some of the extra workload and some of the problems noted in the beginning, you know, are still probably applicable. And so that additional communication that CARE could facilitate would be between the FRS for facility attributes and then other EPA mission systems, so that we can meet those goals. So yeah, within the state, we find that there's many states who have systems that they like. Some of these broader goals of CARE are not necessarily being met, that, you know, are in need of this additional communication among systems. The second question is, will the PDT, and that's the product development team of the CARE implementation approach that we've talked about, will the PDT act as a role of product owner and work on grooming the product backlog, or are they considered stakeholders with one representative acting as the overall product owner? And so the answer to that is yes. One of the jobs of the product development team is to work on grooming the product backlog. We're calling it a priority list, and then setting the priorities for subsequent phases of the work. Okay, so other questions here regarding industry opportunities to get involved. What is the protocol for involving industry users? Is EPA contracting industry folks, or are you leaving it up to states to select entities? Primarily, we have been letting industry folks self-select and let us know if they would like to be involved. On past webinars, we have gotten volunteers and drew from that group. We have a lot of industry contacts between our work that we do with industry directly for the variety of rules that we promulgate here at EPA, and then we also had a list provided from NACA of contacts that that they have, and we've been starting there, and then of course people can get added to the list by signing up for the listserv. The next question is, are you anticipating industry information and data systems to be changed to comport with EPA's system? If so, how and when? I don't think that we were expecting that the data systems would necessarily need to be changed, although it could be that as we move forward, we'll realize that that is the best way of dealing with this. I think right now the industry systems can report to the variety of programs that are being supported, and that's being done in ways that perhaps could be more efficient on the government side. And so we want to find ways of being able to take what's being done now and make it more efficient without having to do a lot of re-engineering of systems. Whether that's going to be able to be accomplished or not, I don't know. And I think the other, in terms of the how and when, I mean, because we're not starting with rule changes and we're starting under the premise of the approaches will be more efficient, we are cautiously optimistic that in order to get the benefits that we see people can get from this approach, that they will want to change things that are needed to be changed to gain those efficiencies. You know, it'll sort of be a win-win. That's what we are hoping that we can do here. And to get to that point, we need the industry input in terms of what will help accomplish that. And so that is why we are taking this end-user agile approach to make sure that we get that input from folks as we go. So we don't end up doing things that unnecessarily cause more work and get to the streamlining and the efficiencies in a more efficient way.
Is there any additional questions? Please feel free to chat those in.
While we're waiting for see if there's any more questions, I just want to draw your attention to this last slide. Also has some additional places that folks can go to get more information. One thing that's not listed, we are working on creating a new website for CARE to have even more information than is available now. That's taking us some time, but we are working on that. And then that note there at the bottom of the slide, there will be an email that you'll get that will have a link so that you can answer some follow-up questions and provide some input. Those are more open-ended questions, so you will have the opportunity to tell us about your concerns and thoughts on various aspects of this webinar and CARE in general.
And Mark, just to further follow up on that, you'll also see them when you click out of the webinar today. If you don't have time to do it right after the webinar, then the email that you get will have the same question.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
It's always good to have options. Well, I think it looks like folks, we don't have any other questions coming in, Kristen, so I guess we can wrap things up.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for joining the webinar today. Remind folks that we did record the webinar and we are hoping to make everything available via the web in about a week. We have to transcribe it to make it available for closed captioning. If anyone has any questions in the meantime, please direct those to Mark, or you can respond to the invite and I can make sure that the questions get directed to the right person. I think with that we will close it down unless anybody has anything else. All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you all.